The honourable member for Wellington-Halton Hills.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, Canada must stand with the State of Israel. The events of October 7th, 2023 were the biggest loss of Jewish life since the Holocaust. On that day, Hamas launched a terrorist attack and invaded Israel. Some 2,500 Hamas terrorists broke through the border, attacking Israeli military bases and massacring Israeli citizens. The latest count indicates that some 289 IDF soldiers were killed, and over 1,100 Israeli civilians were killed. Thousands more casualties took place as IDF soldiers and Israeli civilians were injured. The over 1,100 Israeli civilians that were killed were not killed inadvertently or accidentally. These 1,100 civilians were deliberately and systematically targeted and murdered by Hamas. They were gunned down execution style, just like the mobile killing squads of the Nazis, the Einsatzkommandos, who executed some 1.5 million Jews by firing squad during the 1941 Action campaign in Eastern Europe. It was the Holocaust by bullets, before the Holocaust by gas chambers, that murdered an additional 4.5 million Jews. On October 7th, whole families were executed. Innocent babies were killed in their cribs. And the dead were mutilated. Some of the dead were paraded through the streets of Gaza. The war that began on October 7th is an existential threat to the State of Israel. The very State of Israel is threatened by this war, particularly if Hezbollah in Lebanon and the IRGC in Iran start participating in attacking Israel. And one of the belligerents in this war, Hamas, has targeted Canadian interests. 5 Canadian citizens were murdered by Hamas, and another 3 are missing, presumably being held hostage by Hamas in Gaza. And we in this House call for the immediate release of these hostages by Hamas. And we won't forget about the 5 Canadians that were murdered by Hamas, and we won't forget what will happen to the 3 Canadians currently held by Hamas. Mr. Speaker, there has been widespread condemnation from Western democratic leaders of Hamas's barbaric terrorist attacks, including Canada's democratic leaders. There's been widespread solidarity expressed by Western democracies for the State of Israel at this difficult time. This institution, the Parliament of Canada, projected an image of the Israeli flag onto the Peace Tower as a sign of our solidarity. The coming days and weeks, though, will be a test of Western condemnation of Hamas and a test of Western solidarity with Israel. In the coming days and weeks, Israel will exercise its right to defend itself under Article 51 of the United Nations Charter, which states, quote, "Nothing in the present charter shall impair the inherent right of collective or individual self-defense if an armed attack occurs against a member of the United Nations," end quote. In the coming days and weeks, we should be clear that Israel has the right to eliminate Hamas as a threat from the Gaza Strip and to liberate the hostages Hamas has taken. As casualties mount, we should resist the temptation to call for a ceasefire until the Israeli Defense Force achieves its goal of eliminating this existential threat to the State of Israel. This is a war, Mr. Speaker. It is a legal war under international humanitarian law, under the law of armed conflict. It is a justifiable war against a terrorist group, a group that the Government of Canada has officially listed as a terrorist entity under the Criminal Code of Canada. The State of Israel has the right to prosecute this war at the time and pace of its choosing until it has accomplished its goal of eliminating this existential threat. Israel has the right to determine within the bounds of international law how it will prosecute this war. It has the right to determine the pace of this war. It has the right to determine the timing of this war, including when the war will end. Palestinians are also victims of Hamas. The suffering of the Palestinian people is a real tragedy. 1 million Palestinians have been displaced in Gaza. Every innocent human life, whether it be Palestinian, Israeli, Jewish, Muslim, or any other faith, is of equal precious value, and we must do everything in our power to preserve this precious life and to minimize the suffering of innocent civilians. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.